Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lythcott.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lythcott, and this is episode 69 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Julie Lythcott-Haims for this episode, and this is one of those episodes that it's not grief specific, so it's really for all parents, and it's also not specific to any particular age group of kids. Julie is the New York Times bestselling author of How to Raise an Adult, a terrific book. She was on the show a few weeks back, and we talked about parenting older teens and young adults during this pandemic. I'd encourage you to check that out, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And she was kind enough to come back today and talk about her book, How to Raise an Adult. We had a really terrific discussion diving into the different parts of this. She was actually the dean of freshmen at Stanford for about 10 years and observed the rise of helicopter parenting in the families of the students that were coming into Stanford, and particularly the effects that that style of parenting was having on students. She's got a terrific TED Talk with over 4 million views on this topic, also linking that in the show notes, so please do have a listen to that. So we talked about what she was starting to observe and how this started as a small number of cases and just grew bigger and bigger. We talked about some of the bigger picture aspects, goals for, that we as parents in raising our kids, how we want them to emerge from childhood with what she calls agency, resilience, and compassion. We talked about letting kids experience mistakes and curveballs. You'll want to hear for sure about what she calls life's beautiful F words, maybe not the words you expect. She mentions that. And also, you'll definitely want to hear about Julie's 4-3-2-1-GO method for raising adults, which I will also link in the show notes, and she explains in our discussion. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Julie Lythcott-Haims. My guest today is Julie Lythcott-Haims, and if this sounds familiar, maybe because we talked recently, she was kind enough to come on the show and do a special, shorter discussion about this time of pandemic that we're in, and especially about parenting when you have older teens and young adults. So I thank you again to Julie for that, and I'm so glad that she was gracious enough to come back on the show and for a more full discussion today to really dive into her book, How to Raise an Adult. So let me actually go ahead and do the formal intro here. I know we don't need a reminder, but I'll go ahead anyway. Julie is the New York Times bestselling author of How to Raise an Adult, which is an anti-helicopter parenting manifesto. She gave a terrific TED Talk on this topic, which has over 4 million views. And her second book is a memoir called Real American, which is about her experience with racism and her journey toward self-acceptance. And her third book, which I'm interested to hear about as well, is called How to Be an Adult, and it's forthcoming, and it's for young adults. And she's a former dean of freshmen at Stanford, and she's joining us today from her home in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, Julie, welcome back to the show.
Jenny, thank you so much for having me. Great to see your face and be on your podcast.
Thank you. So I want to start out with a story, actually. I have to tell you this, because I had read, accounts, maybe some pieces you'd written, whatever, over the years of helicopter parenting. And I'm anxious to hear, you tell us what you were seeing. But I thought, gosh, I could hardly imagine as a Gen Xer, right, my parents or myself behaving that way when I was in college. And I thought, but this must be isolated to some small, few cases, right? And I'm sure you'll tell us that it's not. So what hit me over the head one day, I was talking to a colleague, and this is at my former company. So, an educated professional woman with a son in college at a state school. And she tells me this story. She says her son calls her up one day, panicked, that the professor had said if he didn't get a C on this English paper, that he was going to fail the class. He says, Mom, what should I do? And she says, well, send me over what you got, and let me see if I can make some suggestions. At this point, the story turns into this parenting victory story on her behalf. How she, his paper was a disaster, and she was the hero, and she, I don't know what, extensively fixed it up, sent it back, and then she proceeds to tell me the punchline of the story. Guess what? We got a B.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yes.
Boom, Jenny.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. And that's when I said, oh my gosh, Julie, and these people who are talking about helicopter parenting, They nailed it. It is real. And I decided the best thing I could do with my story was tell my own children that night, who at the time were like, 9, 10, 11, 12, that kind of range. Let me just tell them this story and try to set expectations. Like, this is not what college is supposed to look like. So let's get this out of the way now. Right?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, good for you. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's those small moments where we think we're helping, and we are ostensibly helping in the immediate term, getting the kid the C or the B, that turn into this pattern of dependency on us, which means the kid can never achieve on their own.
Yeah.
And then one day we'll be dead and gone, as frankly your listeners might appreciate more acutely than the average listener, because at some point we pass on, and sometimes too soon. And then we don't want that to be the moment our kids face this bewildering, daunting, fearful reality that, oh my gosh, I've never been capable of doing anything without my parent, and now they're gone.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, before we dive into the discussion, would you mind just reading a passage from your book for us? And I really love this analogy you have of the bonsai tree, and you talked about it in your TED Talk as well. So I think it would be great if you could just set the stage for us here by reading this passage. And it's actually the start of chapter 17, which is called "Let Them Chart Their Own Path." Yeah,
Jenny, I actually love this request because I rarely get a chance to read from this book. And it's sort of irrelevant given that we're on a podcast, but I hold in my hands the original copy of How to Raise an Adult that I've had now for 5 years, that I carry with me whenever I'm constantly giving talks on this book, but I don't read from it. But I have, I always hold it up, and it now has a librarian's, binding on it, because a librarian looked at me in horror about 3 years ago because the book was so tattered. Anyway, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to read from my work.
Of course.
So page 211, chapter 17, Let Them Chart Their Own Path. I've already confessed to you that when my daughter's nursery school teacher took me aside and highly praised her paintings, I thought to myself, yeah, but that's not going to get her into college. Avery was only 4 years old, but what she, quote, ought to do was already on my mind. I didn't yet understand how dismissing my child's artistic talents might be harmful to her. Soon enough, though, in my work as Stanford's Dean of Freshmen, I understood the error in my thinking. I sat with far too many students describing what, quote, everyone expected them to study or pursue. And too many responded through tears when I asked, yeah, but what do you want to do? I developed mantras that I'd fold into formal and informal conversations with my students, one of which was, quote, find your voice and honor what you hear, unquote. This was my way of saying, what you're going to be and do in the world is up to you. Look to yourself for clues about what really matters to you. Give yourself permission to be and do those things. At home, I did a 180. I stopped expecting that Avery or her brother would become any particular thing, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, an entrepreneur, and so on. I stopped thinking of them as little bonsai trees that I could prune carefully, and I began treating them instead like wildflowers of unknown genus and species that would reveal their unique and glorious beauty as long as I gave them the proper nourishment and environment.
Wow. Okay, I just love that analogy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think it's
very
really
humbling.
Yeah, if you stop and think about it, like how much am I viewing my kids as needing to be sculpted and molded versus letting them unfold? I think it makes me stop and think. Can you tell us about how you got involved? You landed at Stanford in this role. Can you tell us about what you were doing and what you started to see that started to get you concerned?
Yeah, I was the Dean of Freshmen from 2002 to 2012. And prior to that, I had held a couple different roles on campus. So I'd actually been on campus since 98. And really in the late 90s, my colleagues in student affairs had began telling funny stories about parents who were kind of trying to do things for their student that we'd expect the students could do for themselves, like parents who wanted to talk to a professor about a grade, parents who wanted to get involved in a roommate dispute, parents who were seeking information about programs, opportunities, how to solve problems that you just, in the past, a college student had kind of just handled that for themselves. And colleges are set up with faculty and staff who care about young adults and are trying to help them make their way. So it was sort of bewildering, these parents who seemed to think their kid was incapable and seemed to think the kid wouldn't be able to figure it out, without the parents' involvement. And the number of parents who behaved in the ways that I've just described went from a small number that we could giggle about to 5% and 7% and 10% in the ensuing years. And I think by the time I left in 2012, it was probably 35 to 40% of the parents. You'd seem to think, I have to play a role in the day-to-day management of life for my college student. And so that was one thing, the rise of these parental behaviors. It came with the gratitude of these young adults who were very accustomed to their parents handling things, taking care of business, figuring stuff out, making choices for them. And that's probably the piece that kind of triggered my spidey sense, because, being somebody who was charged with the task of being one of hundreds who would care about helping students make their way, I knew that there was something happening to their agency. They weren't hungering to do for themselves. They were very reliant on one parent or two. And they didn't seem to think that was abnormal. They weren't Gen Xing at all. They weren't, they were just, grateful for the help. And because the help had always been there, and now here it was at college when things were more challenging. So I began to worry for the individual student, when will you hunger for the right to do for yourself? What if you don't hunger for it? What's to become of us as a society if you're quite happy to remain in someone else's care? Literally, what's going to happen to us if the next generation doesn't want to hashtag adult? That's what I was seeing. And my job was to care about my students and root for them to make their way through, this tough but necessary process of forging an older, more capable, more competent, more self-reliant self. And, I was just really rooting for them, and simultaneously, therefore, having to tell parents as clearly, unambiguously, and kindly, please back off. Like, please do not edit the paper such that it is practically your paper as well as theirs. Like, that's plagiarism. That's unethical. Worse, it's teaching your child, quote unquote, that you don't think they're capable of doing this, right? Please stop. So here I was advocating for the students, telling parents to please stop, back off, let them have these experiences, let them try and fail. And then I have the very humbling experience of coming home after 7 years of valiantly rooting for my students and railing against the overparenting. I came home for dinner one night with my 8 and 10-year-old, sat down next to my 10-year-old, leaned over his plate and began cutting his chicken. And that, even though it's not an academic task, instantly I saw the connection between the overparenting that I was doing at the dinner table and what I was seeing at the college level of parents effectively still cutting meat for their college kids. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying college parents were cutting meat. I'm saying it was an analogous thing that they were doing for their college students, the equivalent at that era and age and stage of what I was doing for my 10-year-old. My 10-year-old should be cutting his own meat. Now, Jenny, when I give talks on this book, I tell this story. And at this point, the joke comes. So now I have to do the joke, which is, some of you listening to this story about me cutting my 10-year-old's meat are going, so those knives are sharp. Julie, right? And some of you are going to, I tell live audiences, are surreptitiously texting your 11-year-old, you're going to cut your own meat tonight, buddy, right? Because we're doing this, right? This is an example of what many, many of us are doing. And that was my humbling aha moment when I realized I am part of this very problem I am critiquing, and it made me super motivated to understand why we do this, why we're fostering a dependency instead of rooting for our kids to get more and more skilled and independent. And that's really the tone I take in my book and in my talks. Look what we're doing with the best of intentions, and it helps them in the immediate term because the meat gets cut, the paper gets written. But in the long term, we're depriving them literally, psychologically, of knowing of their own existence. We're depriving them of the sense of self. It's called self-efficacy. And that creates higher rates of, that leads to anxiety and depression. We are doing that to them, and we must stop.
Wow. Okay. You've said so many things that I would love to follow up on all of them. So where to start? I'm thinking, talking about cutting your kids' meat. What else? Because this does start, as you say, it doesn't just pop up as a problem when the kids are 18. It started way back when. And in your book, you talk about glue guns and science projects. And can you give us some other examples of things? And you even talk about in your book, you come from a very high achieving community, and, in your kids' schools and everything you're seeing around you. And I do have listeners with kids of all, age ranges. So I guess, what are some things people should be thinking about with the glue guns and the science projects and the other things in the younger years that they should maybe not be doing?
Okay. So let me start with the kind of existential philosophical framework.
Okay.
We have to really understand, embrace, and commit to the fact that our child is not us, nor are they an extension of us, nor are they our project or our pet. They are, in fact, a separate human being given to us by God or the universe, or however you believe we all get here, right? We're supposed to look after them, but not live their lives for them. And those are two very different things. Okay. So love and shelter and food, teaching them good characters, they can get out in the world and be kind to other humans. Like, these are the, how to work hard, how to be kind to others, shelter and food. Those are like the basics that they need to emerge from our home with. Living their life for them is an encroachment into their own psyche and will damage them psychologically. It probably also reflects an insecurity in our own psyche. Okay, so existentially, philosophically, that's the distinction.
Okay, so that's the framework we should be.
So therefore, right, that's the framework. Therefore, the minute they start to walk, they're walking away. And we shouldn't be all boo-hoo about that. We should be all, yay, this is so amazing, right? And if you think about it, we are. But if you think about it, that's the last time we tolerate their imperfection. So now they're starting to do something on their own, walk, and they pull themselves up in their little toddler bodies, and they fall, and they pull themselves up, and they fall. And we don't say, what's wrong with you? We're walkers in this family. Get up. Right? We don't yell. We're not impatient. We don't feel they're losers. We clap. We take photos and videos that we send to grandma. We delight in the very act of trial and error unfolding in front of us. Now, to be a helicopter parent in this moment, please, nobody do this, but I just want you to have the visual, would be to say, oh no, my child is struggling. That looks painful. I want to help him walk. I want to show everyone he can walk. Whatever your helicopter tendency is, like overhelp, overprotect, fiercely direct, hold their hand too long. The helicopter equivalent would be to stand behind your little toddler, put your hands, your upturned palms under their underarms, and use your strength to help them walk forward. Can you picture it? The grown-up holding their little one under the arms, so that they just gently propping them up so that they can walk. All right. That would be helicopter parenting. No one in their right mind does that. Again, God willing, nobody ever will. But that's the image I want you to never lose sight of. Okay. We don't do that Therefore, we must not do that with respect to any task. Okay. So they're walking away from us. We should delight in that. We're supposed to keep them from walking into traffic, walking into the ocean, walking off a cliff, right? Walking into danger.
Yeah.
But we've decided, if we're helicopter parents, that everything is dangerous. Everything. Okay. So we have to kind of widen our, it's sort of like a game of bowling where we're pulling in the bumpers or whatever you call the things that go up to prevent the ball from going into the gutter.
Right.
It's like we've got the guardrails so close that ball has no choice but to just go directly down the path. Okay. We've got to pull the bumpers back so that they can have their experience and try and fail and try again, as long as they're not falling into the ocean or off a cliff or walking into traffic. Okay, like widen the bumpers a little so that they can have their experience, which will contain imperfection, which will be the sort of laboratory for learning. Okay, we're supposed to want our kids to learn every single skill. They don't learn skills if we're doing everything for them. Okay, so your young child has to tie their shoes, and Velcroed shoes have made it, easier to put that task off. But at some point, you really ought not be tying your kids' shoes. Frankly, I think, I don't know, this is not my expertise, but I'm guessing back in the day, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, maybe 5-year-olds could tie their shoes. Right now, it's can a 7-year-old tie a shoe? I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. That's an example of, yes, you're supposed to teach them how to do the loop and this, and then let them try, and they will get it wrong, and it will be frustrating. And you can say, if they're frustrated, okay, let me show you again, and you can try it again when you put on your shoes tomorrow morning. But they may insist, because toddlers often have that tremendous sense of self. They may say, no, I'm going to do it, and let them. Don't be so busy that you've got to, you always tie your kids' shoes, and then you have a 7-year-old who's never had to tie their shoes. Here's another example. These are just run-of-the-mill household things. A juice drink, a sports drink, whatever you call the drinks that you hand kids that come from the store with a cap. Many teenagers don't have the dexterity and the grip strength to unscrew a bottle. Why? Because someone has always done it for them. Okay, it's another clear example of how, with the best of intentions, we're unscrewing the cap and handing it to them. All they have to do is drink. We're depriving them of developing the strength and skill to do it themselves. And then at some point, they look ridiculous because they can't do a basic task of life like unscrew a drink. It's not that the drinks have gotten harder to unscrew. It's that we have deprive them of developing the strength and the skill. We've done that to them. Okay. So, the kids should be making meals at home. They should know how to make a sandwich. They should know how to use the stove. Not at 3, but, little kids with plastic utensils and a nice little standing stool that puts them right up to the counter can sort things, and they can cut things, and they can help us. We need to invite them into the task of making food and cleaning the house and getting things done. So basic car maintenance, all of these things we're supposed to be teaching, and instead of doing it for them. And I know I'll just wrap this up by saying, whatever the skill is, there's a 4-step method. And I have this in the book that I learned from my friend Stacey Ashland, who has a kid with significant special needs and a kid developing typically. And she applied this method to both kids. Whatever the skill, first you do it for them, then you do it with them, then you watch them do it, and finally they can do it independently. And if we're over-parenting, we're stuck in step 1, do it for them, or step 2, do it with them, meaning they're there, conscious, participating, but they're not learning because we're doing all the work and all the thinking. Step 3 is we flip the tables. We're still there, but we're narrating out loud. We've narrated out loud how to do it in step 2. And so in step 3, we're there for the just in case, but they do it, and we try not to micromanage. Step 4, we're not even there. They can do it completely independently. And we have to get from step 1 of the completely dependent infant to step 4 of the completely capable human over the course of childhood. And we have to constantly be looking for opportunities. That's what raising a child to a healthy adulthood is all about.
Yeah. Okay. What have you learned about why we tend to get stuck on step 1 or step 2? What do you think is behind that?
Fear. Love, fear, and ego. Love, we love our kids. We want the best for them. And we think, well, I'm more capable. I can do it more quickly, more cleanly. I know how to do this. So I love them. Why wouldn't I do it for them? Love, fear. I'm afraid if I don't do it, something bad will happen to them. They won't get somewhere fast enough, far enough. They won't seem to be accomplished. They won't, and then ego. I need my kid to achieve. Therefore, I will do things that help that achieve for them. I will, just to your opening story, I'll help you with that essay so we get a B. I'd rather us get a B together today than you learn, the much harder way how to write and organize your thoughts in such a manner such that you can earn that grade yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And that's, because I'm sure the stakes felt rather high to that mother, right? That her son might flunk a college class.
Right. And that is a high stake, but the higher stake is your kid doesn't know how to do anything by themselves. And what's going to happen when they don't have you to do the living of life for them?
Yeah. Well, and so I guess I hope, and I don't know that I always do this, but okay, if a high stake is failing a college class, a less high stake is failing a high school class, and a less high stake is failing a middle school class.
Right. Exactly.
I guess, are we hoping maybe that parents back it up and maybe let some bad things happen early on?
Absolutely. It's, you can think of them as bad things, or you can think of them as the lessons that life needs to teach your child. We want our child to emerge from childhood with what I call the ARC, ARC, agency, resilience, and compassion. And agency is the ability to do things. I can. Resilience is the ability to cope when things go wrong. I'll be okay. I can get back up. I'll be stronger next time. And the C is compassion. I care about others. I do for others. And so we're supposed to be allowing these things to happen. In my book, I quote someone else's book on the concept of the mistakes and curveballs we have to let our kids experience, because they make our kids stronger. Things like, the disappointing not being invited to a birthday party, breaking a valuable vase, getting detention, having a fender bender, coming in last at something, not being invited when friends are going out. These are things that make us cringe and make us worry and, oh no. And actually letting these things happen, and just as Brene Brown would say, you want to take your kid's pain away, but the greater thing is actually to say, I can't take your pain away, but I can sit here with you as you experience it. Validating when a kid fails or falls or flounders or fumbles, by the way, I refer to these as life's beautiful F words. When a kid experiences these things, our impulse is, don't let that happen because they'll be unhappy or we'll be embarrassed or what have you. No. Let those things happen and sit with your child and say, wow, how are you doing? Okay. I know that doesn't feel very good. I'm here with you. Let me know what you need. We're actually telling them that their emotions are valid. And if we try to prevent them from having the painful experience, we're actually saying your emotion is so fearful, it makes me so worried, I can't let you have it. So this then creates that anxiety in kids, like, oh my gosh, my mom or my dad or whomever is so worried about me. Everything I do matters to them. They always intervene to make sure nothing bad happens. We create this anxiety, like, oh my God, what would happen if I failed? The world would end, clearly, because my parents are so freaked out, always intervening just in case. You see the connection?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's really interesting. And you really do a good job in the book of going through these different pieces. So I'd encourage listeners to pick it up. And I was thinking, as we were talking a minute ago about, examples, and you're talking about chores and cutting meat. And actually, I want to follow up on chores in a second, but there is a part in the book where you do list out by age, like your 3-year-old could be doing these things and your 10-year-old should be doing these things. And when I looked at the list, I thought, wow, like if I could go back and, parent all over again, I wish my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old and my 7-year-old were doing those things, because
same here.
Yeah. Well, and actually, okay, so that's an interesting question then. I guess since probably most people have not been applying maybe this philosophy from the get-go, I guess what tips do you have or suggestions on playing catch up? You said your kids are 8 and 10, and you said, oh my gosh, I'm not going to cut their meat anymore. So, but then you're kind of reorienting how you've been doing things, right, to a new philosophy.
Yeah. So there's a great book I recommend called How to Raise an Adult. It's just a great resource. Because I think it is more than just like, okay, looking around and what are the skills that I want my kids to develop, or what am I doing for my kids that I was probably doing for myself at their same age. I think it is important to try to understand the bigger picture. But yeah, it's hard. The later you try, the harder it is to switch gears, but I think it's not ever impossible. So I didn't know that chores were important. That sounds so dumb. Mm-hmm. I'm raising my kids in an upper middle class environment. Here we can pay somebody to come and clean our house every 2 weeks. It's been an environment of like, do your schoolwork and, we take care of everything else. Anyway, I read a study that said that the greatest predictor of professional success in life was having done chores as a child or having had a part-time job in high school. Why? Because chores or part-time work as a child develops a work ethic. Creates that clear expectation. You have responsibilities and you are held accountable for them. And, they learn that. They learn the great satisfaction that comes from rolling up your sleeves and doing a job to completion and successfully. The human psyche needs that sense of I do things. That comes back to agency. And so I learned that when my own kids were 12 and 10, I think. And I was like, okay, hey, now y'all have to do chores. And I'm this sort of permissive, indulgent type parent that just wants my kids to be happy all the time and have a lovely childhood free from strife and harm and work, as it turns out. So my kids had great analytical skills by that point. They weren't doing chores, but they could do some analysis in their heads, and we're basically like, Mom, if chores are so important, why haven't we been doing them all along? Yes, good point. And I had to say, yeah, this is just trying to make life easier. And it turns out that the way to really help you be successful in life is teach you how to work at home, and chores are the best way. So little kids are happy to pitch in and help out around the house. The older they are, when you get hip to that, if that's been an issue for you as it was like me, the more resistant your kids will be. But you're still the parent, and you get to say, we have a new paradigm, folks, and here's what it is. And as of now, this is what we're doing. And I welcome you to tell me which chores you'd prefer and which ones you loathe. And maybe we can construct a schedule where everybody more or less, gets to do the one they like the most. And if they're, we'll work out the conflicts as they come, but there's no question that this is what's happening. And, it's, trust that they can make the shift, trust that they want to please you. And here, let me get to don't overpraise them. If we're overparenting, often we turn every little thing into a massive accomplishment. Like, oh my gosh, perfect, right? Perfect. Great job, buddy. We say that 90 times a day. Perfect, right? You got dressed. Perfect. You tied your shoes. Perfect. You slid down the slide. Perfect. You didn't hit Billy, Instead, we just need to look them in the eye when they do the chore, just eye contact, smile. Thank you so much for taking care of that. I appreciate you. Genuine smile, move on. Not overpraise. Don't act like undoing the dishwasher is the most valiant thing someone has ever done. Also, don't go behind them when they've done their chore and you didn't like the way they did it and secretly line things up in the dishwasher better. Okay, that's your need for micromanagement and control that's out of hand. Instead, let it run. The next day, pull your kid over and say, hey, hon, thanks for doing the dishwasher last night, but let me show you what can happen if you put the forks in this way. If you put them in this way, the egg can get stuck. So what you ought to do is teach next time rather than micromanage as they're doing it or secretly fixing it behind the scenes without them ever knowing. Those are manifestations of overparenting. You're not teaching them anything if you micromanage or if you clean it up without them knowing. You have to, step 1, do it for them. Step 2, do it with them. That's where you're saying, hey, here's how to do it. Step 3, watch them do it. You can give a little bit of feedback. Step 4, they can do it themselves. So anyway.
Well, this sounds very much like you're trying to advocate for playing the long game here.
Yes, absolutely. That's what it is.
Because it would be much more efficient for you to load the dishwasher or you to fix the dishwasher your kid loaded, quote unquote, wrong. And
Right.
your dishes are done and you're moving on to the next thing. But yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that you have a tendency to be the permissive, indulgent type of parent. I think there are 4 types. Can you just tell us what those are?
Absolutely. So there's this beautiful Cartesian chart, an XY chart, that plots it out, the 4 types, and the axis that goes up and down is how demanding you are, highly demanding at the top, not demanding at all at the bottom. And then the axis that goes side to side is not responsive to their needs on the left, highly responsive to their needs on the right. Okay. So the bottom left quadrant is not responsive, not demanding. That parent is basically neglectful. And typically a parent would be parenting that way because something is desperately wrong with the parent. They are very depressed. They are substance addicted. There's some reason the parent is not able to show up either responsive to their child or with demanding is another word for having expectations for the child. The child is basically left to is sort of feral, probably. None of us wants to be doing that. Okay. The 2 types of helicopter parenting fall into the next 2 quadrants I'm going to describe. The top left quadrant, highly demanding, high expectations, but not at all responsive to their needs. That's called the authoritarian parent. This parent, or the tiger type of parent, this parent is sort of the type that says, my rules, my house, my way or the highway, you will be this, you will do that. And you're afraid of me because I might hit you, I might be verbally abusive, I might condition my love on how well you adhere to my expectations and my demands. Not at all responsive to the child's needs or, wants or is, okay. That's the authoritarian. The other type of helicopter parent is in the bottom right quadrant. This is the highly responsive to a kid's needs, but not at all demanding, no expectations. This is the helicopter parent who's like the concierge. I want to be your best friend. I want to make life easier. That's the kind I am. It's called indulgent permissive. You care about your kids and you're trying to do everything they need and want, but you have no expectation. You're not making them do anything. No rules, no demands, no expectations. The sweet spot is the top right quadrant. High expectations, high demands, and highly responsive to their needs. It's called authoritative. You get the authority of the authoritarian and the permissiveness of the permissive indulgent. It's both together. It's high care, high expectations. Have rules, have boundaries, have expectations that kids have to meet, but also care deeply about their experience, their feelings, their needs. That's where we're supposed to be.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for going through that. I guess one thing I'm thinking about, I'm wondering what, this letting your kid, go to the store by themselves when they're younger than other people think they should, or letting them do a science project that doesn't then look like all the other science projects in 2nd grade because they actually did it themselves. And we could add a lot of things to that list. That might seem countercultural in some communities. It might really run against the grain of what you're seeing all around you. And I guess what would you say to those parents who maybe really want to try to embrace these suggestions in this anti-helicoptering way, but it just like feels like it's going against everything they see around them?
Yeah, 100%. The first thing that I want to say is, yes, of course, it's going against the grain. The overparenting herd is a large herd of people, and we want to be liked by our peers. We want to be accepted by them, and it takes a lot of strength to break away from the herd and say, I'm going to do things differently. I hope that my work convinces you that you want to break away from that herd, because that herd is going at some point to fall off a cliff. Okay. It's like, you don't want to be a lemming. The lemmings all plunge to their death. You don't want to do that. You want to go in this other direction. And I mean that because the overparenting method harms a kid psychologically. You do not want those repercussions for your kid. And so you have to be brave and dare to parent differently. My book is in 4 parts, as you know, Jenny. The last part is very short. It's basically how to be the parent who can parent the authoritative way. And there are only 2 chapters. The first is Reclaim Yourself. And the second is Dare to Parent Differently, or Dare to be the parent you want to be. And Reclaim Yourself is first because overparenting tends to come from an innate insecurity in ourselves, ego, is how I alluded to it earlier, that I need my kid to achieve. I need my kid's science project, as you put it, to look a certain way so we're not embarrassed, right? But who's the 4th grader, you or your kid? It is absurd, patently, nakedly absurd that parents are doing the science project. Schools need to put their feet down and say, this is what a 4th grader is typically capable of. And if it looks like, or an 8th grader or whatever the grade is, if it looks like parental involvement, if you've done more than drive to the store to get, with them to get the materials they want and need, if you have put your hands to it, that's not their science project, and we will mark it down. I would love for every school to grow the strength to say that. Okay. It's just right. You've been a 4th grader. You've been an 8th grader. Now it's your kid's turn. Why are you depriving your kid of the chance to learn and grow stronger and more capable? Why are you so insecure? You need your kid to get, or you need their project to look a certain way so that everyone can be like, "Ooh, did you see so-and-so science project?" So it can go on your Instagram feed, right? This is just a hint. Okay. So, the other thing you mentioned was, you said going into a store. Now that's a different thing. Like, we're actually afraid that some stranger in the store is going to harm our kid. That's a different thing than I'm doing my kid's science project. Are restricting that, or are handling it for them, comes from a different place. That's coming from fear. And this is where we have to say, okay, wait a minute. The rates of stranger abduction of children are so infinitesimally small. Why am I parenting? Why am I going through every day as if that's likely to happen when our children are actually at far higher danger or threat of being killed by being a passenger in our car? Okay. But we let that happen constantly throughout the day. So, it's about also letting our kids practice interacting with strangers. The store clerk, they need to ask a question of the person they're going to give the money to and get change from. Our kids have to have these experiences, not when they're 5, but 8, 9, 10, good Lord, hopefully by 12, 13. I mean, we used to babysit other people's kids at 10, 11, and 12, and now people don't want to let a 12-year-old out of their sight. We're infantilizing them. And so in the chapter on how to reclaim yourself and dare to parent differently, in that part of the book, I say band together with other parents who are like-minded. They exist in your community. Figure out who they are and where they are, and make a pact among yourselves about what you're going to do. And kids going to a store together, 2 kids going into the store while the parents sit and hold their breaths in the parking lot, that would be a great thing to do. Send your kid with a friend or 2. They're not alone. They're not going to get abducted by anybody, okay? Let them have the experience. It's going to take them 25 minutes. You're going to freak out for 25 minutes, but the more they have those experiences, the calmer you will get, and the more skills they'll develop. Pretty soon they'll be, that teenager with a driver's license who's going to go pick up the family groceries because they know how to navigate a grocery store and ask for help when they need it.
And they're building that sense of self-efficacy that you've been talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay. Let's see here. We've covered so much good ground. There was one actually practical question I was thinking of, that's something I hear a lot. If parents have a high school student and maybe they've done poorly in a class and they're thinking about summer school for the kid. And sometimes I hear parents say, I'm requiring my kid to take summer school if their grade is less than X, whatever X is. And I guess I'm wondering what you think about that. I mean, how much is it up to the kid? How much is the parent directing? How much is it a consultation? How do you navigate that kind of, and does it matter if, you're trying to improve a B to an A versus, a D to a whatever, that kind of, what do you think about this kind of practical question?
I think summer school, more broadly, I come from the perspective of build on your strengths rather than try to make perfection out of your weaknesses. And yet kids also need to progress and get the basic minimum level of skill in every subject. So I do think summer school is for F's and D's, to try to make sure that kid gets at least to a C so that they can progress to the next level in whatever the course is. I think that's educationally a sound move so that they do not fall further behind. Okay. But in terms of trying to perfect the B to an A, I think I would not waste summer on that. I would be more inclined to say, what is my kid intrinsically good at and love? That's what we ought to be really helping them develop further. So I would be more interested, if my kid's a math science kid, I would be more interested in a summer camp that offers an enriching math science experience to just really stoke that fire that, started with the spark my kid lit for themselves. Then they need to take summer school in, English because they're only getting a B on their English papers. The difference?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Summer is meant to feel different. Kids need time outdoors. They need time with other kids. They are not doing well psychologically with a childhood stacked to the hilt with course after course of enrichment. In this crazy downtime of coronavirus, kids are learning to design their way out of boredom, which starts to awaken curiosity, creativity, and imagination. And that's the very intrinsic skill set an engineer needs, not just having excelled in math and science, but having the impulse to put things together that never existed before. But too many engineering students these days have never been allowed to draw or make things or, tinker in the garage because they've been enriched to the hilt in after school programs, and they get to college and their imagination is just dead. And it really has to be stimulated and stirred, and that takes some time.
Yeah. Okay. As we wind up here, I was thinking about, you have something you call your 4, 3, 2, 1, go method for raising adults. And I think that might be a good way to maybe summarize some of the ideas and principles we've been talking about here. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are listening and are interested in this, it's on my website, julielylythcott-haims.com, in the tab on parenting. So don't feel like you have to scramble to write this down. So 4, I've already gone over the 4-step method for teaching any kid any skill. First you do it for them, then you do it with them, then you watch them, and then they can do it independently. 3 are the 3 things to stop doing right away. If you're overparenting, stop saying we when you mean your child. We just got a B on the paper. We're on the soccer team. No, you didn't. No, you're not. You're not supposed to be writing the paper. Let them have their experience. And if you're using the linguistic tick we to refer to your child, that's a hint that maybe you don't have that healthy psychological existential distance that you're supposed to have. Stop saying we, stop yelling at all, or stop arguing with all the authority figures in their lives. Teachers, principals, coaches, referees are under assault from well-meaning parents who want to perfect every little variable. And stop doing their homework. And also stop rescuing them. In other words, stop doing, don't bring them their forgotten stuff at school. Don't outright do their homework. You're teaching them nothing other than you'll always be there, which is a big fat lie. They need to learn the consequences of their own inaction. And they need to learn to care about looking after their own business and obligations. So you've got to back off and let life teach them those lessons. That's 4 and 3. 2 are the 2 things that matter most: chores and love. Chores, as I've already said, are the greatest predictor of whether they'll be successful in life because it teaches them a work ethic. And their boss one day, who isn't their parent, isn't going to love the heck out of them, just wants them to work hard and do anticipate how they can be useful. And then love is unconditional love. You want to love your kid unconditionally, to treat them like wildflowers, not like bonsai trees that you're clipping and pruning into the shape of the perfect child. They want to be loved as they are. And then the 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, the 1 is the 1 week cleanse. If you are inclined toward overparenting and you want to own up to it, say in the academic context, you can say to your kid, hey kid, I know I'm always on you. I'm always looking at the parent portal, checking on your grades. And then when you come home from school, I'm asking you what happened. Why did this happen? When are you going to do your homework? I just seem to only care about that. And I know that can make you feel that I think you don't care about those things, but I know you do care. So for 1 week, I'm going to back off. I'm going to button my lip. I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to talk about those things. I'm not going to ask, I promise. That's the 1 week cleanse. I know it's making some people anxious just hearing me say this because you're like, how could I, right? And the joke here is like, don't pick spring break for the 1 week cleanse. They have to be in school, okay? And parents report to me that there's more laughter in their home because they're interacting as humans who care about one another. They're talking about everything else besides the academic transactions of life. How you doing? What's good in your life these days? Tell me something you're excited about. These are the kinds of conversations we want to be having with our kids, not acting like these academic taskmaster micromanagers. So that's the 4, 3, 2, 1.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Okay, we didn't get a chance to talk about your new book. Is there anything you briefly want to tell us what we can look forward to?
Absolutely. It actually has a title different than the one you mentioned at the front end because it literally just got changed by my publisher. So it is called It's Your Turn, The Real How-To on Adulting. It is a compassionate beckoning to 20-somethings and even young 30-somethings into this world of adulthood. For those who are struggling with how to adult, whether they want to, whether they have to, whether they can, this book is written with a very close narrative style of kind of sitting there with them, nodding, caring, teaching, listening approach. And it comes out April 6th, 2021.
1 year from now. 1 year from now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, perfect. I think that's actually a great place to end up here today. So my guest today is Julie Lythcott-Haims, the New York Times bestselling author of How to Raise an Adult. So Julie, where can listeners find you and find your books if they'd like to learn more about your work?
Absolutely. Thanks. JulieLythcott-Haims.com is my website. You can follow me on social, J. Lythcott-Haims on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I have a weekly newsletter. You can sign up for that on the website. So the website's definitely the place to start. And my books are available wherever books are sold. I encourage you to get them at local independent bookstores because we got to help them stay open during these crazy times of the coronavirus.
Yes. Okay. Well, this has just been so wonderful. Julie, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate you. And thanks to your listeners for listening.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Julie Lythcott-Haims as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 69. And today, a great big shout out to all of the listeners in California in honor of today's guest. California is actually, in terms of U.S. states with listeners, the number 2 largest number of listeners behind Washington State, which is, of course, where I live. So welcome. I'm so glad that all of you are here. And please do reach out and let me know if there's any grief programs in your state that are terrific that I should know about that I can help get the word out to other people. And if you enjoyed this episode and you're interested in other episodes that are more general parenting topics, not grief specific, but various authors and experts on the topic of parenting in general, I'd encourage you to check out several episodes. Actually, episode 13 is with Dr. Lisa D'Amour, who is the author of a couple of books. One is called Untangled, Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood. And the second one, the more recent one, is called Under Pressure, and it's about about stress and anxiety in teenage girls. Both terrific books. I recommend you start with Untangled as kind of a good general primer on teenage girls. And I was obviously a teenage girl myself once, but I learned so much and things that I didn't maybe realize at the time or, understand the developmental perspective of what's going on with teenagers. A lot of it applies to boys as well, but it is very informative and very useful. So that's episode 13. We had a terrific discussion there. Also episode 34, if you have older kids, college students, or maybe later high school headed towards going to college maybe in the next couple years. Grown and Flown, Lisa Heffernan, co-author of that book, episode 34. We had a really great discussion around the time their book launched. I believe it was last summer. So I urge you to check that out if you have, kids maybe about 15 and up. Would be a good one to listen to. And also episode 57 with Tracy Biebel. Tracy is just terrific. She's a social worker, therapist, parenting expert in Portland, Oregon. And we had a great discussion that was based on a listener question about moms raising sons and dads raising daughters. And we covered that and so much more. Really terrific discussion. Tracy is just so knowledgeable and has such a great perspective and really a lot of great information to share with us. So I would encourage you to check out episode 57 as well. And if you found today's discussion with Julie Lythcott-Haims interesting and useful, I would encourage you to please share it with your friends. Again, this one is not just for widowed parents. It's obviously not really a grief-related focus, but more parenting in general across all different age groups. So please do share this with your friends. Share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, send them an email, mention it, because I think that her book is terrific, How to Raise an Adult, link in the show notes, so be sure and check that out. And we covered so much good ground in today's discussion, so I hope you found it useful, and I hope you will go ahead and share while you're thinking about it. Okay, I think that's all for now, so thank you for listening, and until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lysk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.